All right, welcome everybody. Today is Tuesday, March 3rd. It is 7:33 p.m. Welcome to the Energy Committee, part of the Environment and Transportation Committee. Let's go ahead and get started. We're going to go through a couple bills tonight, just to kind of get more familiar with them. We had the bill hearings. They're going to be the speakers' bills. And so, Steve, let's start with the net metering bill. Let's just go ahead and kind of go over that. We heard it today, so people should be familiar.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of go through it generally speaking, with amendments, and I know we have Dwayne here in case we need to call on him for some clarification. So we'll go through the bill as we heard it today with the amendments, and then we'll just do a lot of Q&A and kind of see where everybody is.
Okay, I can get started. Do you want me to just talk it through because everybody has a copy of the bill, or do you want me to share screen? What would you like me to do?
Why don't you talk it through? But I know you did a graphic.
Yeah, so to sort of describing net metering in general, since this
Yep,
bill
that's
affects
good. You
net
did good.
metering. All right. So I know you guys like graphics.
You
So
want to start with that?
if you humor me for 5 minutes, I will try to explain what net metering is as a concept before we talk about a bill that sets a stakeholder process to set a new net metering program, and hopefully that will be clarifying for some of you. And then we'll move on to the bill really quick right after that, cognizant of everybody's time. So okay, okay, okay. Okay, so this is just a very simple um, ex just basic explainer of how net metering sort of works using a 3 month example. Bear with me. I've never tried to explain net metering to a group before. I have it in my brain, but I haven't tried to explain it. So it's usually takes a couple times before you actually work out all the kinks. So in general, on the right, you have a visual courtesy of the Ontario Energy Board, whose drawing skills are better than mine. Sort of how net metering works. But basically, you have solar panels on your roof. Those panels generate electricity, and then sometimes your home, sometimes your home is using so much electricity that no power is going onto the grid. Sometimes you're not at home and you're sending power onto the grid. And over the course of a month, that net difference that occurs over the course of a month is what is like the net metered effect for purposes of the net metering program. And then you sort of get paid for that net effect. And how you get paid or credited kind of depends on the amount of power we're talking about. So on the left, I have a 3 month in a row trailing example of how it works in Maryland right now. So I'm just using some basic numbers that are within the realm of possibility. So let's say your panels produce 400 kilowatt hours of energy in a month, and your house uses 1,000 kilowatt hours of energy in a month. 1,000 kilowatt hours is the average residential bill. That is a typical amount that the state of Maryland uses when determining bill effects. Okay. So your bill will look as if you used 600 kilowatt hours. So basically, you spun the meter backwards. That's how you are billed. Um, what that amounts to is the full retail rate is sort of spun backwards. So if you look at your bill, you have a supply charge and you have a distribution charge, and it's times the number of kilowatt hours on your bill. Same with Empower, times the number of kilowatt hours. So the dollar amount times kilowatt hours equals your charge. In this scenario, you reduce the kilowatt hour charge and you save on all portions of your bill. Okay. Month two, your solar panels produce 1,200 kilowatt hours, but you only use 1,000. So that's great for you. You're billed as if you used 0 kilowatt hours that month. Okay. The only thing you pay is your fixed charges. So there's a fixed charge on your bill that even if you use no power, you pay. And that's basically utility cost of service. There's minimum fixed costs that are involved in just having you hooked up. So there's a fixed customer charge. Basically, you're billed as if you have no usage. And they credit you, you get a 200 kilowatt hour credit for the next month. So next month you're already starting with 200. Okay. Third month comes around, your panels produce 700 kilowatt hours, your house uses 1,000, and you carry over your 200. You're down here is your build, so where it gets a little bit trickier. But your build is if you used 100. So you get your 1,000 that you started with, you net meter 700, and you carried over 200. So 1,000 minus 700 minus 200, your build is if you're 100. That's how this process continues to work in general, and it goes month to month to month to month to month. There's a true up mechanism that occurs. It used to be always, and now it depends. But the basic in April every year, you get paid out. You can get paid out for that bill credit amount. That credited amount, you can get cash instead. It's optional now. You can also carry forward indefinitely for most customers. And when you are paid out the supply rate times your usage. Your supply rate is just the one part of your bill. Your bill is two main parts, supply and distribution. You're paid out at the supply rate. So ongoing, as your bill is credited each month, it's the whole rate that is actually worth more, even though you're not seeing cash. And then at the end, you're paid out, or every April, you can be paid out extra cash. And that's usually called net excess generation payments, something along those lines. But that's basically how it works, and it just continues month to month to month, netting out your usage, and you're compensated as if your meter is being spun backwards. Is effectively how it works. It's not really sort of what is happening. It is $1 on your bill. They're reducing it by the kilowatt hour, so effectively is that. Sorry if that was a little unclear. Again, it's the first time I've tried to work through that, but that's just the basis of what net metering is. Okay, and I'll stop sharing.
So at the end of the day, right, Steve, if you produce more than you use, then you can receive, depending on the time of year, you can receive some financial gain. But if you use more electricity than you produce, then it's just kind of discounted. So if you are, let's say you have enough solar to produce about 70% of your usage, then you have to pay that additional 30%. But if it's the opposite, then you can make a little bit of money.
Yes, and there's a limit in the law. You can only go up to twice as big as your power. So you can't just you can't just fill your field with solar panels as a residential customer. You can only go up to twice your usage, but to interconnect.
Right.
So that's the basics. I can
Okay.
go through the bill if you'd like.
Well, let's go through some questions because it looks
Okay.
like we have a few. Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Real quickly, Stephen, you still get an electric, the premise, you still get an electric bill every month, is that correct?
Yes, you still get a bill every month.
Okay,
The
so-
lowest you can go is your fixed charges,
Okay,
basically.
so in month number one, I'm gonna get a bill for 600 kilowatts of usage.
Yes.
In month number two, I get a bill of 0.
Yes.
In month number three, then I get, I'm good to down, I get a bill for 100 kilowatts.
Yes. This is in this hypothetical, yes.
Okay, that's good. Thanks. I want to make sure I understood myself.
And I think Delegate Morgan, and for everybody here, a lot of this is variable because it depends on the time of year that's going on. Like if you're, in very early spring, you might not be using a lot of electricity because the winter's kind of over and the spring hasn't started. Same thing, June or July or August, you're going to be kind of like upside down the other way. So just to keep that in mind. That's why it varies so much because of your use. Delegate Naraki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real quick, Steve, the rate that you were say that there is some excess that's owed, given the chair's example, 70% you produced, 30% you didn't. Are you still billed at just a normal customer rate for that 30%?
Yes. It's as if you were billed. It's as if you used only 30%.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on the general idea of how net metering works? All right. So, Steve, do you want to start going through the bill as amended?
Sure. So doing this a little bit live. The amendments don't change too much. I'm going to work from the fiscal note summary, as committee staff often do, and I'll add on what some of the amendments do. So in general, I'll start with what's the bill trying to address? Like, why is this an emergency bill requiring PSC to conduct a proceeding? And that's because there is a net metering cap. The speaker talked about this today. There's a statewide capacity cap for this program of 3,000 megawatts. That's about 1.5 Calvert Cliffs of capacity. In the most recent report, basically there's enough projects in the queue. They're not built, but there's enough stuff in the queue, like in the line to get into the program that will exceed 3,000. So that has happened relatively quickly. This is the first year that PSC reported, hey guys, the cap is close. We don't think it was the previous year, definitely not the year before. Every year they report on this, and this was, I think, the first time it was sort of like, hey, we're growing.
Can we pause
So-
there for a second, Steve?
Yes.
Vice Chair Guyton, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you so much. I hate to interrupt, but I think maybe this would be helpful at this point. Steve, so why did we set a cap? Was it just a target so that we could shoot for that? Or is there another reason that not we, but they way back set that cap and said this is all that we can do?
The original cap was the oldest cap I saw was in the late 1990s, and it was in the kilowatts, not megawatts, literally kilowatts. So in general, we didn't get to this part, but okay, you see the customer in this scenario, how your customer, the net metered customer, are saving money, and isn't that great? The flip side of that is with net metering, the utility is not eating this cost. The costs are recovered from everybody else. So that is effectively, if I were to guess, like that's the reason there is a potential cap on all of this stuff, is that if it grows too far, then there's not enough everybody else, right? Like the potential effects are too large. So the cap was 1,500 megawatts, and then it was increased to 3,000 megawatts, and that was in 2020-ish range, 2021, I think. This is basically the cap. As the cap has moved higher, there's been a look at the program, and then the cap has increased. Like that's pretty much what has happened.
Steve, I think that
That's it.
may be able to add something.
Yeah, so I just two things. First of all, to Steve's point, yes, October 1st, 2021 is when the cap went from 15 to 3,000. And as for why you normally would have a cap on this first type of system is your system as a whole, your utilities still need to bill your transmission system to your house, right? Just because you put solar panels doesn't mean you don't get connection to the grid. It's because if you don't produce enough, right, you're still a customer, therefore you're still pulling that energy. Now, the way the system is produced right now, as Steve said in his example, when you produce 1 kilowatt, is you're selling 1 kilowatt to the system. What you're not counting in that price really is the transmission piece of sending that kilowatt out to the network, right? So the more kilowatts are being produced and paying at that higher level, the more residual costs are in the system that is socialized to everyone else. So if you didn't have a cap in place, in reality, what you're saying is everyone can produce, but then who pays for the actual transmission piece and distribution pieces of the rest of the system? And that still needs to be socialized to those that can't really produce. Think of HOAs, think of buildings where you as an owner can't really produce, so you're eating up all the rest of those costs inside the system.
So Andreas, to basically the reason that we have the caps is so that every few years we can go through and reevaluate the program as a whole, see where the program is in conjunction with what our needs are and where the industry is and where our needs are, and just so we don't let it get too far ahead of us. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Steve, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay. So what this bill does is requires PSC to conduct, it's an emergency bill, to conduct a proceeding exploring the development and implementation of a successor program to the state's existing net energy metering program. It's a stakeholder process. Everyone should be involved. All the people that testified today, I would anticipate being involved and providing their input. At the end of it, there's going to be a report that includes recommendations for a successor program. And there's some additional sort of guardrails or guiding principles in the future program that aren't necessarily in the existing program. Incentivizing, it's minimizing ratepayer costs in the short term and the long term, and language about balancing fair compensation for energy exports with needs of the grid, ratepayer costs and benefits, etc. So the sort of like the stakeholder process and sort of the subsequent program are sort of the guide rails in the legislation are to approach it from a more balanced approach, because as opposed to an approach for a sort of nascent industry, this is more of a more mature industry type program. And I would just say a lot of states have sort of evolved in their net metering programs, how the compensation is paid out. Like, I think that's really one of the main pieces of this is like, how much do you get paid for your net? How much is a net metered system being compensated for what it's doing? And then that at the end of the day, I think that's really what this all comes down to.
And the idea, Steve, right, is there are several bills, and there have been a lot of conversations in the past about us just setting whatever that limit is and us doing it. But the idea with the speaker's bill is to have the Public Service Commission really do the majority of the grunt work here, because this is exactly what they do. They have access to all of the data, all of the spreadsheets, all of the algorithms, all of the predictions, all of the experts. And so they can better make the micro changes that we need to ensure that we are moving forward in a responsible, positive, and financially responsible manner. Is that about right, Steve?
I think so. I think the part of, I mean, you heard in the Sunrise, the other net metering bill today, that there's a lot, if you try to do it all in statute up front, there's a lot to consider and think about. And I think that allowing a stakeholder process to sort of take all of that in and come back was part of the thinking behind this particular model in this bill. I wanted to highlight a few things on amendments that were brought up, a few things today. So what happens to the existing net metered systems, the ones that are already installed today? There's language in amendment saying that they're grandfathered in. There is additional reporting. There's intent language on the cost. I believe that it is less than, like, sort of like the compensation is less than the existing program. And language about prioritizing projects that are in the existing queue for whenever there's a net metering to a successor program.
Steve, can I go?
Yes, we got questions. So,
so one of the questions that I had is, how do you define grandfathered?
I mean, I don't know if the bill further.
Sorry, Steve. Yeah.
Who is?
Sorry, it's myself. Well, I'm sorry, I apologize.
Okay, Andreas.
Yeah. So if you go to the first amendment, on the reprint, it would be page 2, right after line 25. It says an eligible customer generator under existing contract or tariff at the time that the commission implements a successor program under 7306 of the subtitle shall retain the existing contract or tariff under the successor program. And then there's a little bit extra detail behind it. So basically it must be on the ground and already producing to be grandfather in.
Okay. In the ground and producing.
Yeah.
Or on the ground or on the roof for the.
So and it would be technically that 51 and change % of the program that is already in there. I think it's 50-some % right now.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Lapp, did you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, I was just gonna add real quick to what Steve was saying there. And we think it's a good idea to send this to the commission, because we can weigh in, and we're definitely concerned about non-net metering customers paying, essentially subsidizing net metering customers, which adds to their bills, and that could mean people who can't get the net metering for one reason or the other. Community solar helps with that. But we've run some numbers, and as you get higher and higher, as Steve or Andres was saying, that subsidy gets more. But there's also benefits to the system from net metering in terms of reducing that peak load. So that's why it gets complicated.
Right.
And why
And
it's
further
important to
build
send.
out of other
Yeah.
other big generational facilities.
Yeah, and like we would be very involved in that, sort of. It's also our technical consult, weighing in to make sure ratepayers are treated fairly on this, and we get the benefits from net metering that there are. So thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Boyce?
All right. So just to be clear about this, the grandfather clause on page 2, line 25. My solar hits the ground, hits the roof today, and tomorrow the commission implements, I'm grandfathered in.
Yes.
Okay. 1. Okay. 2, I think I'm a bit confused. So the successor program is supposed to replace the current program or enhance the program and then go to 6,000 megawatts.
Okay. I can take this one. So right now it's like 1,500. Well, right now the state is like at 1,500. I'm using a rough number. When the commission adopts a new program, assuming we're under 3,000 still, whatever it happens to be at that point, those are the people that are in the previous program. Then you have up to 6,000 total under the new program, whatever that new delta is. The new program, there's intent language in there. The monetary incentive, the intent is that it's less. So that's the importance to the existing projects of the sort of, I'm calling the grandfathering clause, is that because the intent is the future incentive will be less for future projects.
I think I'm still lost, but that's okay.
So if you were in the ground today, you get the full retail rate, right? That is quite that's all of it. That's effectively, that's the highest compensation type. In the future, maybe you don't get the full retail rate. You get some proportion of that. So instead of 16 cents, you get 12 cents, right? Like something that's what the intent language there is saying, basically. I'm just picking numbers that are roughly, I'm not describing any real intent there for the future price. I'm just using it as an example.
Yeah, it's more that's what they're charged with doing, is coming up with that rate, which would be less.
I understand that. I guess I'm just trying to clarify, under the new program, our net metering program is going to be 6,000.
That will be the cap.
Well, that will be the new cap.
Right.
Okay. But that's after then, if I think to Steve's point, council's point, if they're the 1,500 folks in the 1,500 megawatts, they would be the grandfather, then you would roll them over. So now that's 1,500 minus 6.
You would have, using that 4,500 under the new
right. So that's
framework.
Okay.
Roughly.
Got it. Okay. Thank
And
you.
I think Dwayne, did you want to jump in? Dwayne?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Yes, Delegate Boyce. The new program would replace the existing program, and the cap would only rise once the new program is in place, and it will take into account the existing kilowatts that are already on the system.
Right. So to the point council made, it'll be, then it's let's say there's a fictitious 1,500, then it's just 4,500. But this is all once implemented, once folks are kind of grandfathered over, so on and so forth.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
That is correct. And it's a little bit of a moving target, obviously. Vice Chair Guyton.
Thank you so much. I had two questions. One, I just think I answered by actually reading the bill, which is good. So just to clarify, I think I often have the same questions as Delegate Boyce. That makes me feel very smart. So to conceptualize this, I think David Lapp mentioned that right now ratepayers are subsidizing the people who are getting the payments back on the net metering payments back or credits back from the energy companies. But under this new regime, the 49% of those coming on new to get to the new cap would be subsidizing those that were grandfathered in. Is that correct? So you've got, and we would have to increase are we going to increase the amount that can go to ratepayers in that case? Or I guess I'm still confused about how we're going to get to that extra payment for the 49% without charging it back to ratepayers, if we're going to keep the others the same.
I think it was still, I mean, we take the question, it's effectively, I think grandfathering is a good way to think of it. It will just be a separate thing that continues, like it's currently happening and it will continue to happen. And then the new program, which has the program itself has a slightly floating total capacity because it's a moving target with how many get in under the net metering one, right? The current program. But that piece will function the same basic way, except the per unit compensation, the intent in the bill is that the per kilowatt hour compensation that is paid to the net metered customer, it will be less than is happening under the existing program. So think about it this way, you could get the same amount of the same 2,000 megawatts for a lower ratepayer impact under the new program. It's a lower per unit incentive. It would still happen the same way though. It's still recovered by
understand that
utilities.
part of the bill. I guess what I'm trying to wrap my head around then is, so is it going to be low enough? And I suppose this is what the commission has to figure out, that it's still encouraging the solar and the ratepayers are then no longer subsidizing it at all for these new people. And I guess that could go to Mr. Lapp, because he's the one that made that comment that perked my ears up to begin with.
I think the idea is to get it right so that there is no subsidies from non-net metering customers to net metering customers. And because that's a tricky way to do it, that's why it's best to give the commission that responsibility. Right now, there is a slight subsidy. It's not because of the cap. It's not really big, but there is one. I mean, we've done the numbers and there is one. But the idea is to, be fair to everybody. And so that the net metering customers are contributing what they should be contributing to the fixed cost of the distribution system, because it's the fixed costs of the system that a net metering customer avoids through the net metering because of the way it's set up right now in the statute. And I think the idea here is to correct that. So there is no subsidy and net metering customers are treated fairly and non-net metering customers are treated fairly. So there's no cross subsidy.
Can I follow up with one more thing? I know it's getting late.
Yeah, let me
Okay.
just say this to put this into context, because I think this is important.
Okay.
I think it's important to understand that the net metering customer still has to pay for distribution and transmission and a variety of other things, because they're never completely off the grid. There are days when they're producing and they're like, I'm good. It's a beautiful sunny day and it's 72 degrees out and I'm producing all my electricity. And then there are days when it's 103 degrees outside and they must be on the grid. So they have to contribute. And I think part of this is trying to get that right to make sure that they are contributing, well. And I know, Mr. Lopez, I think you had your hand up. I don't know if you want to add or
so
if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, Chairman, like you said, and I think it's just to clarify a little bit to Vice Chair. So this, as Mr. Lab said, the subsidy is always going to be present because there's always going to be a members who are under the current cap, right? And so the idea is that the new system makes that more fair, but there's always a cost of that net meter customer when they're producing, that because they're selling it to the system, the way that the system is currently set up, they're getting all the benefit of as if they were sending that energy into the system and already to the new load, when in reality they're just sending it up without putting any cost through the distribution and the transmission side of the house. So it's really how to balance that part and balancing it so that it is still, attractive to the solar persons that want to do the net metering, but also a little more fair for everyone else while raising the cap. Because again, raising the cap is really what makes this socialization of the cost a bigger issue every time you raise it more and more. It's more issues of how to balance that out. So that's the intent.
Okay, yeah, I really appreciate that. The other question that I was going to ask, in response to, I think what Mr. Lapp said initially, how long is this grandfathering going to be in existence? How long would be considered, is it for the lifespan of those panels? And then if they start replacing them, they're then put into the new program? Is it a contractual term? The life of the building, and how long are we going to give them these extra subsidies in perpetuity?
So right now, the language in the bill doesn't put a limit on it. And I believe someone had an amendment suggested today about putting a timeline on it. But we did have many suggested amendments today. But right now, it doesn't say specifically. And Dwayne has his hand.
Dwayne?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may, the speaker would like to offer an amendment to, if the committee would like to go along with it, to set the limit of the grandfathering to about, 15 or 20 years. That would be in line with what other states have done when they've grandfathered, NEM 1 projects into a successor program. So, the committee will allow it. We think that would be a common sense, change.
And Dwayne, or Steve or Andreas, whoever, I have it in my head, and I might be wrong, that the current one is 15 years. Is that correct?
I don't believe the current NEM tariff has a limit on it. I think it's just whenever the project is, no longer workable.
Okay. All right. Delegate Morgan.
Thank you. I'm gonna go back to Moron 101. If I understand it, if I'm hearing things right now, net meter phase one, call it whatever you want to, we have 1,500 megawatts in the program at the current time. Is that right?
It's roughly there, yes.
Okay, and the goal will be, and how long does it take? Okay, and then the goal will be to eventually, if we get to net meter 2 or whatever, it could go up to 6,000 megawatts, correct?
As the bill, yes, takes it to 6,000.
And remember, Delegate Morgan, with the 1,500 or 1,700, whatever there is still a significant amount in the pipeline that the PSC is predicting are going to come on very quickly.
Well, that becomes a second part of the question. How long did it take us to get to 1,500? And then
about 20 years.
20 years?
15 years, 17 years, somewhere in there.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry, I'm doing my math wrong. It's 8 p.m. 20 plus years.
Okay,
20 plus years.
So
the statute's been there since the late 90s.
Takes us 20 years to get to 1,500. We can go to 6,000. Now, there may be a substantial amount of people waiting, but can you take a swag on what the difference is between, 20 years to get to 1,500, we'll go to 6,000, and someone just sat there and said, with a grandfather clause, blah, 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 and it'll take so many years to get that. This could take 30 or 40 years to get to 6,000.
Let me hold on. Let me pitch this to Mr. Lopez, because I get what you're driving at, Delegate Morgan, but I suspect that turnaround number is going to be.
I'm just throwing a number out there. I can't be 2 or 3 years, though, could it?
So just a little bit more more input. So while right now we have the actual number is 1,537 on the ground, ready to go.
Yeah.
In the pipeline alone, we have, as of this November report from the PSC, 2,911. So we have almost 3,000 in the pipeline. And those are projects that are either awaiting authorization, are in the utility interconnection queue, or already accepted and still waiting on getting construction. So while it is true that it took us a long time to get to the 15 number, the reality is that on the pipeline alone, there's almost 3,000 there. And the reason is actually evolving that quickly and that faster is that the actual technology of the production piece of the solar has become cheaper and cheaper over time, easier to construct, easier to install. And so all those things really, the first 20 years to get us here, we were up in the front side. I think that looking at the 6,000 is not the huge of a number right now based on what's on the pipeline and what's the reality of the ground of how this technology is moving right now.
Okay, if that be the case, now, and correct me if I'm wrong, when it comes to net metering, are these residential or is it all commercial or is it everybody under the sun? No pun intended.
Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that it's also community based.
Yeah,
It's
it's up to 5 megawatts for
Mhm.
community solar, and I was actually the reason the cap is approaching so rapidly is community solar. So community solar, we didn't get into this type of virtual net metering. It basically, through some creative billing that occurs, allows the sort of aggregation of individual customers that can't put solar on their roofs, maybe they don't have a roof, to subscribe to a larger system built out somewhere that is flat. Those systems can be up to 5 megawatts, right? So it's pretty easy to count to 3,000 if you're counting by fives, right?
Yeah.
So that is one of the main pieces that has grown recently. Community solar is in the teens. Got it started as a pilot program and then became a permanent program, I think in like the late, like maybe 2019, 2020 period. So community solar is where a big piece of the net new, like total megawatts are in the queue coming. It's a more efficient way to add megawatts. Much easier to build one array rather than on 50 roofs, right? Or more. So like that's kind of that is driving some of the overall net metering capacity growth as well. So it's technology and it's multiple things, but community solar is also driving one of the rapid increases in the last couple years.
Okay, then on the premise of that, there'll be a date that this becomes established. How long does it take the companies to figure out how to get themselves set up in order to promote and support the program?
So testimony today was community solar about 2 years. Residential can be as short as I heard down to 2 to 3 months. And then really large solar, which is outside of really the scale of net metering, is longer than that, even several years, 3 to 5 years. But community solar, I heard 2 years today at testimony, several years, because these are fairly large. You're thinking 38. I mean, it could be up to 25, 30 acres on a 5 megawatt, somewhere in there. So it's a fairly large project.
Is there any way you meant I go back to the chairman's point, in the summer you're probably going to be pumping out and pumping in for sake of lack of a better set of words. Is there any way to game the system to bank this at a low price to sell it back at a high price?
Yeah, storage.
Okay. So there are if you have a battery or something, you could, if you're smart enough and want to spend the time and the money to do this, you could do it through a battery to buy low, sell high.
Well, that depends on something called time of use and a bunch of other pieces, but I think Ben, you're probably most qualified to answer this particular question.
I think that is more of an outcome of the successor program than the current program, because the current program is effectively we're pretending that excess generation is basically being banked and used to offset your usage at times when it is not actually being used to offset your usage. So under a successor program, which would have to be obviously designed, we can more align maybe a combination solar plus storage unit to capture the old NEM benefit of making your load disappear. But today you wouldn't have that same incentive. I would say today with time of use rates, yes, there are some ways to kind of maybe game a little, but I don't know if the investment would be worth it relative to, because we're already kind of with the virtual metering setup, accomplishing a similar outcome.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Delegate Naraki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not really sure who this question is to. Maybe it's to Mr. Lopez. I'm not sure. But so we talked about all the power that's potentially coming online over the next couple of years. Is a pretty big number. How much of that is dependent upon, I'm not asking like individual, but what do you think is dependent upon federal subsidies to make those projects economically viable? Because that gets kind of Delegate Morgan's question about like time periods here. That could, if all subsidies go away or whatever the federal environment looks like, that could push that time frame out potentially.
So that's a very good question, Delegate. I think that it's a big unknown. As we know, the federal impact subsidies federal level has been going off, and actually has been going off for a couple of years already. So it has gone down, and you still see an increase in production. There's definitely benefits for the solar systems, especially when you tie them to a battery storage. So it really is going to be dependent on how that new system, next generation looks like, right? And how that new PSC process goes through. And I think that's the intent of the bill, is to see how to best balance this to still make it attractive. As an energy policy person, I can tell you it's always beneficial, because you're still adding generation to the system. And from a ratepayer perspective, your numbers actually on the long term are always better, right? The cost of the equipment is going down. So even if you take out all the subsidies piece of it, you know, the subsidies helped get us to a certain point, but I think the balance is right now is lower than it is. It still is a big cost. It's not, this is not a cheap version of it, right? But it also helps that, you know, if you do a community solar piece of it, which is economy of scale is kind of approach to that. So there's some benefits to all these stuff. But I think it's a very good question as to how the numbers are going to be looking down the future based on the subsidies going away.
Okay.
And Mr. Lopez, can you comment on the federal subsidies, the ITC?
Sure. And I'll let Steve round me out, because I think he knows a little more. But my understanding is July 4th is when all the credits actually do go away. If it's not on the ground or started by July 4th of this year, you don't get access to those credits. And I believe also that if you started by July 4th, you have, I want to say 2 to 3 years to be up and running. So there's also time limit on the other end of it.
Mr. Bond, did you have something? I saw your hand up. Did you have something you wanted to?
Well, more specifically to Delegate Naraki's question, you know, the numbers that I got from PSC is that the federal ITC accounted for about 30% of the project costs for these projects. So, you know, that 30% number is pretty significant.
Yes, sir. No, thank you for that, Mr. Bond. That actually is a good number for us to know, I think, there.
Do you have more questions, Delegate, or?
No, that I think just helps me put this all in perspective. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Steve, you want to keep going?
That is that's the basics of the bill. It is a study and then implementing a new program subject to the sort of some of the guiding principles that are in here. I think that that is the way to conceptualize this, is that the bill puts in guardrails and intent, basically intent, and then allows the stakeholder process to implement the next level or the next successor program up to 6,000
Right.
megawatts.
Okay.
So the last time the cap was increased, the compensation structure was not changed. So it was just I'm pretty sure it was just a straight increase. So this bill is doing, it's
A lot more.
Yes.
A lot more. It's raising the cap, it's changing the program, it's pushing the decision-making to the Public Service Commission, it's redefining guardrails, it's doing a lot more than we have. Delegate Boyce.
All right, I just clarification. So of the 2,911 projects in the pipeline, while they're in the pipeline, they're not in the ground. So they would not be a part of the prior program, and then moving forward would be a part of the successor program because they're not in the ground, although they're in the pipeline.
They would need to meet the exact definition of sort of the grandfathering clause in the bill as it's written right now, which does not include any kind of additional, and 6 months after anything the bill does not include anything like that. You know, when the program is effective, if you don't have, when the new program is effective, if you don't have an existing
So council, the
contract, you
people
don't
in
go.
the pipeline are just, they're subjected to the new program.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, when the program goes into effect on its effective date, unless they have steel on the ground.
So this will function just like currently this would function like the ITC phase out. It's an incentive to build now to get in under the new program, just like it's an incentive to build now to get the ITC under the federal. You can conceptualize it as a similar incentive, basically, timing incentive.
Mr. Bond, did you want to add anything? I see
Well,
your
I
hand up
was,
and then
you
down.
know, I'm willing to speak to the rationale behind that if the delegate would like, but if not, it's
Yeah, why don't you? Absolutely.
okay. I'm gonna share my screen really quick. I think, sorry. I don't know. Can y'all see my all right, yeah. So this is the net metering report from the PSC that was given in June of 2025. And this table 10 shows what the ratepayer impact is currently and what the ratepayer impact would be if we allow, continued build out under NEM 1. And so as you can see in service territories like Potomac Edison or Delmarva Power, you see a very significant ratepayer impact if the current NEM 1 program was allowed to continue at the rate that it's going. And so it's important that we are being fair and equitable to the ratepayers in those specific service territories. And so by allowing those projects that are in the queue to continue building out, once that project is built, that ratepayer effect is solidified. There's no way to, minimize that ratepayer effect without, bringing upon legal challenges and stuff like that. So our only chance to keep those costs from rising to that point is to get ahead of, that type of build out.
Thank you. So you're saying, again, the successor program would, for instance, Potomac Edison is that the current capacity is 60 cents. It would not necessarily be 26. It would hopefully be something lower.
Yes.
Right.
So
Okay.
that would be the hope. And, with the intent language, we made clear that whatever incentive comes from them to, it has to be lower than the current incentive that's being provided.
All right. So, Dwayne, we have all the current amendments. Are there any other amendments coming that the subcommittee needs to consider? Is there anything in drafting? Are we clean at this point, or where are we?
We want to offer the amendment about clarifying the grandfathering timeline. There are further conversations, the solar industry would the solar industry cares strongly about having a grandfathering of projects in the queue. I just think it's important for the subcommittee and the committee at large to understand that any projects that are not built at the time, if we allow, grandfathering of projects in the queue, that will have a ratepayer impact at the current, price levels.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so trying to, thread that needle, like we are not trying to harm the solar community. We value the solar community. Distributed generation is very good, but we can't ignore the ratepayer impacts that are present. And so we're going to try to see if we can come to some type of solution. But the amendments that the committee has at the moment is what we have agreed to fully at the
Great.
moment.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no more questions on this bill, thank you, everybody, for the work session. And we'll just continue the conversation, Dwayne. And then let's go ahead and move to the next gen bill, which is 1532. We'll do it the same way, Steve, if that works for you. Just kind of talk through it, go through Q&A, same kind of thing, just getting everybody up to speed, and then we will we'll go from there. And Dwayne, if you can hang out, that'd be great.
Okay. So I don't have a visual that's needed right now, but when we get to the empower piece, maybe I will bring up something because it helped me figure out what's going on with the bill. So there aren't many amendments. There's only a short amendment from offered by the speaker on this bill. So I'm going to again read from the fiscal note to start. It is a bit of I describe it as maybe a sort of an omnibus bill. It takes there's little changes to many pieces of the public utilities article, was one way to think about it. So I'm just going to start from the top and provide a basic overview of like the main points, and then maybe let questions determine where we go in terms of detail. Does that sound like a decent way to do this? Okay.
Sounds great. We'll
Thumbs
just
up.
yeah.
Okay. So we're describing this as making various changes to the Next Generation Energy Act of 2025. That was the big one last year. It makes modifying certain deadlines under the Empower Maryland program, and I'll also say adjusting the goal and cost effectiveness requirements for the sub programs. It requires an RFI and a study, RFI and then a potential procurement on a third-party administrator for the Empower Maryland program, assuming it comes back cost-effective. It imposes specified restrictions on the approval and administration of multi-year rate plans. And in there, that's number 3 on the fiscal note, I would also say on amendment, it also prohibits the use of a forecasted test year in rate making generally. That's the amendment. Lowers the threshold for electric customers to qualify for large load rate schedules. Those are upcoming tariffs that minimize, or supposed to eliminate, but minimize the sort of subsidizing effect of data centers and other very large load customers. It's bringing it down from 100 megawatts to 25.
Can you describe that? What exactly that means?
Okay, so we'll start with that one. The bill last year, Next Gen requires this large load tariff that minimizes sort of the cost, basically makes the data center pay for its costs. That's going to be the idea, is to have a tariff, which is your rates that you pay as an electric customer. That tariff for large loads will incorporate costs so that other ratepayers are not subsidizing the data center. Why is that important? It's 100 megawatts was the threshold last year. That's huge. 100 megawatt is in any context that's not a data center, is a ton of power. For a data center, hyperscale data centers that are being built in Texas and Pennsylvania are multiple times that. But for any normal commercial customer, 100 megawatts is gigantic, right? In fact, it's so large that in Maryland right now, there aren't any 100 megawatt data centers. The only one the Frederick data center campus would go above 100 megawatts. But I think there's general consensus among the regulatory stakeholders that 100 is too high. And I believe Office of People's Counsel has discussed 25. Other states are doing 25. Basically, 25 megawatts is a lower threshold, casts a wider net, catches more data centers in this with the definition to limit the same effects, right? The everyone else paying for some of their costs. So that's the basic idea of that piece, is to just catch more. The number was a little too high last year.
And Steve, also, I think we heard today that the neighboring states are going to 25 as well. So that kind of helps us all be in the same posture.
Yes, I think that's the part of it as well. That seems to be just the general driving consensus is towards something around 25 megawatts.
Okay. Mr. Lopez, did you have anything to add? And then we'll go to
Yeah.
Delegate.
So the other thing is, from the federal perspective, right now there's no specific number. However, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission normally looks at 25 as the number when they talk about large loads as well. So that's where the premise for the rest of the states around us to go to that number also comes from, is the idea that we think the federal level will end up being that level as well.
We think the federal level will be the
25
okay.
when they're defining it. So the right now they're going through their reliability process and standards, and part of it includes setting definitions for the standards and stuff like that. They haven't set up a definition right now for what a large load is, but a couple of actions that they have taken and a couple of readings from their orders, they kind of hint at 25 being the number
and that'll be FERC.
And that would be FERC. Also states around us, I believe Virginia, if they haven't already, they will soon. Illinois, I think it's already in state. And those are important because they're PGM as well, which is within our area.
Right, because it's, yeah. I think it's important to recognize that, because that puts us all on a competitive level playing field. So when data centers are going, well, Virginia will give me this and Pennsylvania will give me that, the more of our neighboring states, particularly in the PJM, that we can align with, it helps prevent that shopping and that kind of pushing against each other and trying to pit us against each other in other states. Delegate Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the 25 megawatts for I'm gonna get this wrong, for large loads, as we're talking about data centers, correct?
Yeah.
So generally,
yes.
Something commercial that's large. So that's, just so that I'm clear, that's so that, I guess, per Maryland, and if this becomes, I think, to Andreas's statement about the feds looking at an average number as well, that would create a somewhat of a low level load bearing, hopefully regionally. So then we don't get what is this, the phantom load issues when, I guess, data centers are applying for projects and they kind of overestimate. I'm trying to fit this in. So I guess the question is what does 25 megawatts even look like for either a data center or somewhere commercial? And then how does that potentially, what does that affect on the rest of us? I know that means that we're not paying, but does that also mean that those, whether it's the data center or a large commercial company or facility, then could potentially manage their own, if they had to have their own generation, they could do something more for themselves on site, or that means that they would use the system, but we would not be paying most of the cost. So it's less load bearing in that we're not paying the cost, and if we do, it's at a very minimal cost.
Why don't I call him Mr. Baker, because he put his hand up.
I don't know if I'm talking.
No, it's good. And I think the phantom part is not part of this, but
no. Okay, well then.
Yeah, so I guess really quick. Yeah, phantom, like that concern. I don't think this bill would really get to that issue.
That's fine.
Very, very tangentially. That's okay. But to your other questions, So I think the other piece of the context around this 25 megawatts is to also the definition of large load also includes a statement that says 80% capacity factor. And that is very important to understand in this context, because that means this customer is pulling a lot of energy from the grid, or they're pulling their capacity from the grid almost all the time. Because what capacity factor basically represents is your peak usage over the entire, like averaged over the entire year. So that means that these customers are like if they could draw 1 megawatt and they drew if they drew 0.8 times 365 times 24 hours, that would be what that represents. So that means that helps us demarcate and really slim down which customers would be part of this tariff, and that kind of defines a data center because they're constantly pulling energy
So
from
that's
the grid.
so Mr. Baker, that's 25 megawatts per the year per the formula you just did, or per
20,
month?
I'd say it's the way to multiply. This would be 80% energy. So it's effectively 25 times 365 times 24 times 0.8. And that basically represents their energy usage over the year. So average energy is 80% of their capacity over the year. So 20, like you'll hear the words 8760, so 8760, which is the number of hours in a year. And so you're looking at their energy usage over time compared to their peak. So that means these customers are drawing a lot of energy over the entire year relative to somebody like you and I as a residential customer. You're using effectively, you have a capacity factor probably closer to 30%, maybe 40%. So you're not using the grid as much as a data center would be. And so that limits which CNI customers I am looking at here. Our work group that is currently working on the tariff, just to highlight, we didn't look down to 25 megawatts, but there was some questions floated asking how many customers were up to 50 megawatts in size. And I think there were less than 20 identified across the utilities, with the majority of them being Baltimore Gas and Electric customers. So I don't know what the delta is going down from 50 to 25 today. But I don't even think that was accounting for capacity factor. That was just megawatt size. So I don't know that we're going to capture a lot of other CNI loads with this change, is what I'm getting to.
Okay. I think this is all still foreign to me, but I'm working through it.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. We have, we're not voting on anything. We're just talking, and we can continue these conversations because it is very complicated.
It's the power of thousands of homes per year. Like it's equivalent of thousands of regular homes is the power. We can do the math offline. I could show you the math offline, but it's thousands of homes.
But that's thousands of homes.
It's the equivalent.
365.
It's the equivalent of. It's the equivalent of thousands of homes normal use. So I'm just trying to give you a unit that you might kind of get can intuitively grasp.
So if I may,
Mr. Lopez, Mr.
yeah.
Lopez.
Thanks, sir. Just get to what Ben was just saying. It's 1,000. Imagine 100 homes, but the lights are on most of the time. So that's the factor piece of it is that pooling of energy is higher because it's constantly happening higher and higher. So it's not just the 25 being the maximum that you can pull, but it's the fact that during the year you're pulling close to that level most of the time. Normally you don't do that when you get home. You have a peak in the morning, you have a peak in the afternoon, you're at work during the day. So that's how you need to think about it, is these loads are constantly just pulling from the system. So it's important that we understand where they are and how to capture that cost specifically.
Okay. Steve, you want to keep going?
Yep. I'd like to share. I'd like to cover. Last thing I didn't mention is there's a change to the description of how. Well, it's two things. The nuclear energy generation project. Last year there was a bill to incentivize. It's a longer term thing. It's probably 4 or 5 years before things really even potentially get going. It's a longer term potential procurement for nuclear energy. This is changing the definition of how it would be it was changing how the incentive is defined. I think Public Service Commission asked for this. Same basic idea, but it's aligning, to me, it looks like it's aligning the definition with how we treat renewable energy credits now.
Council, is this page 9? I'm sorry.
Yes, page on the bill. Give me a sec. I'm looking
I'm on the
at,
reprint.
yep, give me 1 second. Yes, page 9, lines 19 through 25.
Thank you.
Changing the definition of zero emission credit. The environmental impact of 1 megawatt hour of electricity that's derived from nuclear energy, that sounds parallel structure to me with what we do for regular renewable energy credits and solar renewable energy credits. The Public Service Commission I believe that was the reason this is in here. Ben, is that accurate?
A little. It's also done that way to protect the credit from a lawsuit. There was some concerns that the definition as worded would run too close to what is defined as a contract for differences, which went to court and got over. We did a procurement. But anyways, long story short, something like this came up years ago and we lost in court over it. And this is a way to avoid a similar lawsuit.
That as well. Okay, so it runs too close to Hugh v. Talon ruling. Yes. Okay. And this is the fix to that. Okay. Same basic idea though. There's on 7/12/20 continues for a much longer time about how the nuclear procurement would go, and this is changing the sort of the type of incentive basically to avoid the lawsuit. The last thing I wanted to mention is there's a study led by Power Plant Research Program on streamlining the permitting process for energy development, and it's basically identifying 50 priority energy sites suitable for new or expanded generating stations or energy storage devices on brownfields, industrial sites, well, including brownfields, industrial sites, sites with old or decommissioned generating units, and also consideration to sites with surplus interconnection capacity. Identify bottlenecks and related to state and local permitting timelines and develop recommendations. So it's like a two-parter. The priority sites is interesting. So it's getting at a list of places that the state maybe would want to develop because they're not being usefully used. The language about surplus interconnection capacity would be, imagine you're sitting at a place and it could take 300 or 400 megawatts onto the grid, but it's not currently doing that, but the substation is there and the lines are there. So it's just being not used. So that's what surplus interconnection capacity is. Basically, that area can take more power onto the grid. It's already set up to do that. So might as well prioritize that rather than building it somewhere where you'd have to upgrade the grid anyway. So that's the study. That's the end of the main pieces that I like, each of the individual pieces, but there's more detail on all of them. If you wanted to go by question or by area, Mr. Chair, you just let me know.
Why don't we go through a couple of questions? Delegate Morgan.
Thank you. Stephen, where was that? I saw it before and I've lost my track of thought. Where was that 50 site thing you just mentioned?
That is at the back of that should be at the back of the bill because it's uncodified language. That is section 3 on page 11 and into page 12 of the bill. The 50 priority sites is specifically line 1 of page 12.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I don't have seeing any questions. I do want to at least describe empower changes. I think those are an important piece, and can briefly show what's going on with that.
Okay.
Okay. Maybe that will almost certainly generate more questions. Give me one sec. All right, share. Okay, so in the bill, you're gonna see two things here for a sec. So I need to pull up my reprints again. Sorry, I'm gonna pull my reprint down to my other screen. Come on.
And council, do you mind just referencing the page?
That's why I'm pulling up the reprint so we
I'm
can talk.
slow. I'm sorry.
Yeah, all right. Scrolling here. This is going to be starting on page 4. Starting on page 4 of the reprint is where we're getting at the Empower Maryland program. That's 7222, etc. It keeps going. There's a lot of dates being changed in the bill. The reason I have the chart that I'm showing you is because I'm trying to. A lot of the dates in there are sort of like lead ups to the actual plans. So I was trying to condense some of that stuff down to just focus on what is really occurring, or trying to get at what's occurring for purposes of like the programs as they will be implemented. Okay. So the color coding here, you've got current law in the bill and you've got years. The color coding is my attempt that is sort of like the grouping of the Empower plans. They're usually on a 3-year cycle. When we changed it, General Assembly changed it 2024, there was a quick 2-year cycle, and then it was supposed to go back to a 3-year cycle. This bill changes it again, and there's a 2-year cycle and a 2-year cycle. I think you could also conceptualize it as a 4-year cycle. This could maybe be a 4-year cycle. I'm not entirely, wasn't 100% clear, but basically, eventually, it will head back toward being on the 3-year cycle is what's happening. The main piece though to pay attention to is this percent. That's the goal. That's the amount of that's the greenhouse gas emissions reduction target. Goal. There's some complicated math that occurs in the background. The percents are with electricity, but there's a greenhouse gas conversion that occurs. You've heard that the Empower Maryland program has a greenhouse gas emission reduction goal. So this is the percent in statute that you can see, the percent in statute that's on page 4, lines 28, 29, and 30. That's where these changes are occurring. What's going on is under current law, the goal was supposed to get more aggressive. The higher the percent, the larger the savings. That's the way to think about it. The larger the savings, the more you have to spend to reach that savings. Okay. So what is happening is instead of getting more aggressive on the goal beginning in 2027, it is staying the same from the current amount in 27 and 28. So the difference is a 0.25 percentage point difference. So rather than saving X percent or X emissions, X amount tons of CO2, it will be less than that in the next 2 years. So it's basically just flatlining it for 2 years, and then heading back to the regular goal. So the difference is for 2 years. Doug Morgan, you have a question?
Doug Morgan, go ahead. You got to unmute yourself. No, still
I
got
get the little mic keep going. I'm sorry. So Steve, if I read correctly, for 2 years, we're going to reduce the amount by 0.25 and then ramp back up again. So is there really net any real savings at the end of the day in the Empower thing? Besides
that is a 10%. I mean, it's a 10% reduction for what it otherwise would have been in terms of like a relative amount. And then that last bit that you have to cover is, all programs to get toward the goal. If you imagine the goal is like a stack, right?
Yeah.
And we'll get to this, how this is the other main piece of the bill. If you imagine it as a stack, the first thing you do, you add to it is the stuff that's really cost effective. It's cheap to do. Okay, in the old days when you could still do it, that would be screwing in LED light bulbs, right? That's really cheap and easy to do. And as you get further and further, it gets harder and harder to reach, to go further, right? It gets, everything is less effective as you go. You've run out of low-hanging fruit, is one way to put it.
Less headroom.
Less headroom is one way. So there is a savings associated with a lower goal in those years. The other piece of the bill, which is also designed, I believe, for savings, is on page, I'm scrolling. It's all the way down here. Okay, page 8 of the bill, lines 14 through 18. I'll give everybody a second. But basically, right now, when you reach that full, you're trying to get that full stack, there are programs that you do, that the utilities have approved that are not necessarily the individual program, the individual component is not cost effective. Taken as a whole, each utilities program is cost effective. But there are subsets of that each utilities program that are not right now. What this bill is introduced here says is basically you can't do that anymore. Each individual program has to be cost effective on its own before you can put it in the full stack. So that is another cost saving measure in the bill. So it's a two-parter. It's two parts to the effect on Empower in the bill. It's a shorter way to go, slightly shorter way to go, and the individual components have to be cost effective.
So
I'm going to stop
the-
sharing for the time being. I think that's
so my dumb question then becomes, is there going to be any savings to the ratepayer on their Empower surcharge on their bill with this?
I think maybe PSC would be able to, I mean, in general, the direction should be yes. Dollar amounts, I'm gonna ask Ben.
Okay, yeah. So I've taken the two parts. So the capping of the surcharge or reduction, that will that should theoretically stop a growth that could potentially happen next year by trying to serve a higher goal next year. So that's your first, that's I guess stopping a potential increase from next year. The part that would lead to a reduction or a potential reduction this upcoming would be the second part that Steve was discussing, which is you can only run sub programs that pencil out as cost effective. And so, because today Empower's done the cost effectiveness testing is done at a portfolio level. So all the parts when looked at in aggregate, have to net out cost effectively, but not everything under the hood was cost effective under the theme of we had to meet the goal, and you wanted to have enough diverse programs that everyone could take advantage. This would remove those sub portfolio programs that aren't penciling out as on the cost effectiveness testing as drafted. And so that's where you would probably more likely see the bill reductions coming in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Vice Chair Guyton.
You know what? My brain might be too tired to actually formulate a cogent question at this time. I was going to ask a similar question.
We're
but
running out of steam here. I think
I'll listen. I was going to look at the bills. It looks like even if and I've seen the list, there are some of the Empower programs that are not as effective as others, and I would agree probably with trying to wean those out of the program, but we are still under this bill and moving forward, as far as we know, we're still putting the same amount that we are now into the Empower program, and it'll just be utilized differently, right? There won't be an increase in 2 years, but there won't be a decrease either. So I'm assuming we won't see a change to bills because of this. Please someone correct me.
No, I'm going to go to Mr. Bond to answer that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There will be a change to bills because of this change. we're working with PSC. We got some back of the napkin math, so it isn't 100%. But, did a very simple thought experiment with PSC. The bill language as is, how would the Empower program have looked in the previous cycle with this current language? And what we found was that would have been a 47.5% reduction for BGE. That would have been a 42.1% reduction for, Delmarva Power. Pepco is actually pretty cost effective, so it would have been a 22% reduction for them, 43% in Potomac Edison, 44% in Smecco. So, generally it would have reduced program spend for about 40% for the majority of the state. And so moving forward, what we saw, like for a BGE customer, that comes out to about $5 a month. Pepco like $4 a month, and that's guaranteed savings starting 2027. And then what the speaker's office is interested in doing is, on top of that, those savings for cost effectiveness, doing a pay down, because now the Empower program is a pay-go program, so you're paying as you go. Some type of pay down of the first, whatever sum of money to, give even greater ratepayer savings. So without a shadow of a doubt, with these changes, ratepayers starting 2027 would see their Empower surcharge lesser than it is currently.
Great. Thank you so much for that information. And I just have to clarify, because I know David Lapp put his hand up. I am not anti-Empower. I was just clarifying the bill. If it
No.
sounded that way, I don't want you to think that.
No, I don't, Madam Vice Chair, I didn't think it sounded that way at all. I mean, all of these are questions. People are just trying to understand this. There's no gotcha. This is not a gotcha work group. And I know that we are going on an hour and a half, so I want to thank everybody. Let's just finish up this one piece, and then we can circle back at another time when people have fresh minds. But I know a lot of us haven't eaten dinner. Some of us haven't eaten lunch, so it is late. Mr. Lapp, did you have anything you wanted to add very quickly, or?
Yeah, I don't want to, I might be missing something here, and this is really just about making sure we're all understanding, and maybe I'm not understanding, but this provision here will say that certain programs within a portfolio, if they don't meet one of the tests for cost effectiveness, they will no longer occur. So, I'm not going to rehash like the pros and cons of that, but my question is, and maybe Ben can weigh in, but it doesn't, there's a goal freeze, and then there's this provision, but the other programs the utilities will still be required to meet the same goal. So they'll use other programs to meet that goal. So I'm not seeing it. This isn't an elimination of the goal. So though I'm not sure I see the cost savings that people are talking about, because the goal itself, it's going to be frozen under this, and we're fine with that. But there'll just have to be other cost-effective programs that meet the cost-effectiveness test in order to meet that goal. It's not, you're not reducing the goal by the programs that aren't cost-effective. They'll be backfilled by other programs because the goals will have to be met. So
Let's let Mr. Baker answer that, because he's got an answer.
Yeah, so what we gave to the speaker's office was an assumption that the utilities wouldn't be able to rebalance their portfolio to make up the difference in goal.
That's not in the bill.
1 minute.
Yeah.
The bill says that the read of the bill is that if we can't design cost-effective portfolios, or if you can't design up to the cost-effective, you don't make goal. But that's going to be a policy call of the General Assembly. But if you want it to be if you're looking for cost like the utilities will try to rebalance their programs, but at a certain point there might not be additional things to squeeze out of those programs such that you would get cost savings. And that's something that I think we would have to wrestle with at a commission proceeding to figure out what it is. But so I would say you probably should think about what guidance you want to give us to ensure that we don't continue going in circles trying to continue to find more and more juice to squeeze out of these programs. And so I think that's a question for you all is how far. So yes, I think there would be an attempt to rebalance the portfolios. And the question is there really enough savings across the remaining portfolios to get to the stated goal? If there is not, I don't think I would read the statute as saying we have to continue going towards goal. But if we need to have clarifying amendments to that, somebody should let us know.
Okay, Steve, why don't you let's put a pin in this and we'll circle back on that.
Okay.
Particular issue. Delegate Naraki, do you have a question on this particular piece? Because otherwise I'm going to call
Yes,
it.
I do, sir. I
Okay,
do,
go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair. You're taking me back, by the way, Mr. Chair, to like St. Mary's College right now, economics classes. So like and I do my best work after 9, so I'm just kind of getting into my groove right now. So maybe this is for Mr. Lapp, maybe this is for Steve. I'm not sure who this is, but overall in the Empower program, because I know there's definitely had to have been this analysis somewhere. Where do we sit from the macro perspective of the marginal cost to the marginal benefit overall in the program? Has anyone, I'm sure that some smart person has done this work to kind of see where we're at. I'm not talking about penciling out individual projects at the micro level. I'm talking about the macro level of like what's out there.
I believe, and Ben can correct me, but I believe it's about 2 to 1 overall beneficial. So for every dollar in, I mean, this is, based on the cost effectiveness tests that, the PSC has an independent evaluator, and overall the benefits are 2 to 1.
So I guess maybe I should probably rephrase that a little bit then, Ms. I'm not talking about kind of how the program has looked historically. I'm talking about going forward, about the projects that are left out there, because we as we've said, they're not the low-hanging fruit. So I'm really thinking about those future projects, what the marginal cost looks like to the marginal benefit for those, that overall pie of projects that are left out there, whatever those might be, HVAC systems,
That's
big
quick.
building upgrades.
Mr. Baker,
So-
can you answer that?
They are still, so we are constantly testing this, and that will be
Sure.
constantly evaluated. So we, every year, the utilities will say, here's how we tested. And then we have an evaluator that effectively checks to say, yes, we believe this is reasonable, how you arrived at what was cost effective and not cost effective. And that's always lagging by a year. So we're finalizing the 2024 values right now. And so that's being tested on the historic side. And then going forward, the utilities. So right now, if the law is not changed, in the August-September timeframe, the utilities will file their next proposed 3-year cycle plans. And they're going to say, here's what we think is cost effective, and here's how we would design the portfolios to meet goal for the next 3 years. At that point in time, everyone's going to get in front of us and make filings saying, here's what we agree with, here's what we disagree with. And the commission will have to say yes or no. But there is a constant, to your question, there's a constant test for this to make sure that they are penciling out. As I said, historic, how it is currently worded, it's done at the portfolio level. So you have some things that are very cost effective, some things that aren't passing, but on net, the portfolio has been above 1. And they would have to bring up to us a portfolio that is above 1 when they come to us this summer.
What happens?
Let me just jump really quickly to Mr. Bond, because I know he has his hand up and he might have some more light to shed.
They can finish out the start experience. I had a response in regards to the conversation that OPC was having with PSC.
Oh, okay. Doug Naraki, did you want to
Yeah,
follow up for Mr. Baker?
Yeah, I did have a follow-up for Mr. Baker. So, Mr. Baker, what happens when marginal cost equals marginal benefit? What do we say that the project doesn't go forward? I mean, what happens at that point? I'm just still trying to wrap my head around all.
Right. That's where the commission would have to make the hard call about so if we have excess headroom in the portfolios, we can just say, throw it out, don't go for it. If we don't have excess headroom in the portfolios, that's where the commission would have to make the hard call to say, well, does this balance out? Because I think there's like 4 or 5 things the commission has to discuss in its order when they say if something can go forward. One of those is bill impacts. One of that is goal. One of those is this cost effectiveness testing. I feel like jobs is one of them. and maybe there's one more in there. So at that point in time, the commission would have to make the hard call of saying, well, are we going to make goal? Or are we going to run a portfolio that doesn't make goal? And so that would be at that point in time, the commission would. So the easier call would be if we have a portfolio in excess and we have removed programs before for being too cost ineffective. But if it gets to the point where the whole portfolio isn't passing, that's where the rubber meets the road, and they're going to have to make the hard call on that.
Mr. Baker, are those portfolios fungible in the sense of if there's headroom in one portfolio, but not in another, can you transfer that headroom from sort of one to the other there? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah. Like, can they try and get more savings out of the more cost-effective programs and do less? Yes. And
so,
we
sorry, it's 9 o'clock, so maybe I'm not.
Yeah. No worries. Yes, we have had utilities transfer budgets in cycle. We do that all the time. And I think there's a certain point where, you can only get so much out of a specific program before you start eating either into its cost effectiveness or you've saturated it. I guess like a good example of this is the behavioral program, which is the smiley face program. You get those emails that say, here's how you're doing against your neighbor. I'm probably not going to get a lot more savings out of sending you more smiley faces. I need to keep sending you them every once in a while, but an additional one every 2 weeks isn't going to maybe do something.
Right.
Versus,
if I can just,
that's the balance that will happen. But yes,
hold on, Mr.
It can be done.
Okay.
If I can just add,
hold on, Mr. Lapp. Hold on.
okay, all right.
Does that answer your question, Delegate Naraki?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to kind of go down a rabbit hole there for a moment.
Okay, Mr. Lapp, did you have anything in reference to this subject?
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to say that there are, I mean, the analysis show that there are a lot of cost-effective measures out there. We could have a huge Empower surcharge if we were to do everything that's cost-effective. But the other factors that Ben is talking about is why, the Empower, so we don't want that Empower surcharge. We don't want to fund all cost-effective energy efficiency through Empower because it would blow up customer bills. But there are lots of things out there that are cost-effective. I just want to make that clear. It's not like we're running out of cost-effective measures to increase energy efficiency or reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Lapp.
Great, thank you. Mr. Bond.
Regarding the OPC and PSC, conversation about cost effectiveness and backfilling, Southern Maryland Energy Cooperative in their testimony offered amendments, clarifying amendments, and the Speaker's office agrees with those clarifying amendments. So if the committee would like to take those, and those clarifying amendments would just make clear that if the utility is unable to meet goal due to cost effectiveness challenges, they will be held harmless by the PSC.
Got it. Thank you very, very much. Delegate Boyce, I think you have the final word, or at least the final question.
Oh, Jesus. Okay. I just want to be clear, and thanks for that, Dwayne. So generally, we're pushing efficiency and cutting costs at the same time. Is that what I'm hearing?
Mr. Baker, or
that's the intent of the program. That's the goal.
That's
push the most efficient programs.
All right. And then to the last point that was made, a program comes up through metrics. It's not doing well. It's below the mark. PSC would have the authority to say that it's got to go, or would the company have to make that decision? That's where I was.
The committee, likely the utility, I mean, it would end up as a discussion in front of the commission. Likely the company would bring it to us and say, hey, this doesn't seem to be penciling. As you saw in the exchange between me and Mr. Lapp, I assume that if some people disagree with the utility's math, that there would be some sharpening of the pencils to check their math around that cost effectiveness claim. I also think that it would be a worthwhile discussion, not tonight, to think about is this happening mid-cycle, or is this more at the beginning of the cycle only kind of thing, in terms of how often are we checking to stop? I think there was concerns raised about flip-flopping every other year in the program and causing some start and stop problems.
Right.
And so, but ultimately, yes, I would say once we tell the utilities to go forward with a plan, they would come to us if they want to deviate from that plan and say, hey, like, this isn't working. And we have work groups constantly talking about this kind of stuff.
And then that money or either creates the efficiency, but potentially creates the cut, because then if they decide that they come before you, this particular program or programs aren't working, then that's a cut and then by it being a cut, and then becomes an efficiency per se.
Well, I guess it would be a cut to the cost of the program, but I wouldn't be, sorry, because we're dealing with Empower energy efficiency.
Yes.
If I cut the program, I'm not handing out energy efficiency measures. If that makes, so sorry, it would be a savings efficiency to the rate, like to the surcharge. Yes.
Yes. All right.
Okay.
We're done. Thank you. Sorry. Ooh,
No, there is no apology, Delegate Boyce. I want to thank everybody for everybody who's on the call, everybody that's helping to push this forward, and all of the delegates. I know it is a very, very long day. This is a record for us. We've gone for 1 hour and 39 minutes, or an hour and 40 minutes. I told you guys when we had our initial lunch, it'd be hard work, and it's going to be hard work. So thank you all very, very much. We will circle back on all these bills, and we'll keep pushing forward. Again, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Great
All right, see you in the
job.
morning.
Wonderful job. Thank you.